here, and welcome back, debating metalheads, for another episode of the always intriguing, always exciting Debating Metal. I'm Kenneth Dean, the Dean of Metal, along with my co host Chris Kay. We've been gone for quite some time, and we'll address that shortly. But in the meantime, while scrolling through one of my online feeds, I came across an article that intrigued me enough to do a whole episode on it. On this episode, we're going to discuss the best 1-2 punch in metal.
A 1-2 punch is a boxing technique that involves two quick punches in succession, typically a jab with the left hand followed by a hard right punch. When releasing an album, what better way is there to hook the listener than to knock them on the floor with two badass songs? Today, Kenneth and I will discuss some of the best first and second tracks on a metal album.
So don't get caught by a left hook from right field. Punch that like or subscribe button and listen to our show on your favorite podcast platform. Now sit back, relax, turn it up to 11, and let the debate begin. But first, a little housekeeping to catch up on. Chris, we've been gone for a while.
Yeah, I think since we did our show on the road, and even before then, we probably took a few weeks off. A lot of that is really my fault. I took a new position at my job, the place we both worked together actually, this last year, and it's been a lot of my time staying late, a lot of days, things like that, to kind of turn things into kind of something new. So it's just required a lot of my time and energy, and there's been a lot of good things. Like I've had some health problems in the last few years, and I'm really on a good path in a good direction. And so feeling positive about a lot of things. And unfortunately, some of this just kind of had to take a back seat. So we're looking to kind of get back on track and maybe do like an episode every 2 weeks. At least for now. And then hopefully, sometime this year, maybe we get back to a regular schedule. So, appreciate all the listeners out there and, the patience, and, we get emails from time to time, people just kind of sticking with us. So really glad to hear that, and, appreciate it.
Talking about our listeners. So, Christoph, I believe is his name. Let me get it right, because we've spoken about him before on the show, and I believe he sent us his annual email on January 1st to us that he's done for the last 3 years, which is pretty cool. Let me get this. Okay, yes, his name is Christoph von Uthman. And I apologize, Christoph, if I've pronounced that last name wrong, but we received your email, your Happy New Year from Germany 2024, and your best of lists. Basically, he sent us a best of list of, I think it's from Metal Hammer in Germany. And so it was really just, a really cool thing to see that someone pays attention to us and felt the need to be able to share with us the fact that there's a top 10 list, or top 5, I think it's top 5 of several different metal categories in the magazine. So I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's much appreciated.
Yes, it's from Metal Hammer Germany, I think. Yeah, because he put 2023, but I think that was a mistake. Anyway, so, with that said, tonight's episode is going to include, for once it's back, it would never really went away, but we just stopped doing it for a few because of the type of episodes we were doing. But we have our Big Four, and our Big Four this time is going to be the albums of 2024. So that'll be coming up a little bit later, but now we're going to get back to our regularly scheduled program, which is basically the best 1-2 punch in metal. So, as I mentioned, I was scrolling along in one of my feeds, and I come across, I can't remember what magazine it was, but and I apologize for not giving on-air credit, but it had an article talking about, is there a better 1-2 punch than such and such? And we'll discuss such and such in a little bit. But it's like 1-2 punch. So basically, you put on an album, the first song just kicks your ass, and then the second song might not necessarily be faster, might not necessarily be heavier, but it's such a good song that it's like the killer 1-2 punch. And we've come up, you and I did some research on what we think are, based on the albums that we like, we listen to on a regular basis, what we think are some of the best 1-2 punches. But all in all, and I said I would mention it later, I'm going to mention it now. The article's number 1-2 punch was Metallica's Battery and Master of Puppets. And I think, in my personal opinion, that is one damn good 1-2 punch. And I think that's the standard bearer of 1-2 punches when it comes to these kinds of this discussion. Is it better than this? And there's be a few albums that we talk about, and it's like, yeah, in my opinion, yeah, in your opinion, no. That's what this show is all about.
I mean, it's about metal music, isn't it?
I'm
just playing.
So,
is that what it's been all about this whole time?
And you know what? We were supposed to be doing something on squids, right, or some shit.
Yeah. Oh shit! This whole time, this was a marine biology podcast, and I forgot.
Anyway, so why don't you go ahead and go first and give me what you think is a pretty good 1-2 punch on an album?
Okay. I'm going to start off with a band you kind of made a reference to in the opener. Anthrax, The Sound of White Noise. Potter's Field, followed by Only. Potter's Field is such a good opening track. I think it's really underrated. And Only, especially for the John Bush era, I think it's probably one of Anthrax's best songs, to be honest. Obviously today, with Joey Belladonna, they still do Only live, and I know they had to make some kind of agreement with Joey to do that. But it's just such a badass song. I think Potter's Field is such a great opener. Only just kind of like takes it to the next level and just like really is that second, straight punch. And I know you love that album too. It's a killer album as a whole, but I think that those two tracks in general are really what hooked me from the beginning.
I agree with you on this 1-2 punch. So I remember when I put that album on and I hear John say, "I was born to love you." And I'm like, wow, they're saying love on an Anthrax album.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's different, but it was
but it's like that dirty, grungy love. It's not like, it's not like a sweet song, No,
it's not a sweet song at all. And when you look at when you think about the topic and what it's covering, no, it's not a sweet song. And it was, it's that, as that telling of "I was born to love you" is very telling of the actual song itself and the rest of the lyrics. Great opener. I mean, that's just heavy, and unlike their typical album openers where they just come in straight and kick your ass and then come with a really good song afterward, right? This is the opposite. This is a slow, heavy, trudgy song which's got a shit ton of hooks in it, and then it goes into Only, which is a huge hook. It's a great song, and to me, it was so different from Anthrax's thrashy stuff but it was still so good, and that's why I like this album. So I agree with you on this one. This is a pretty good 1-2 punch, and so it does stand out for me in that regards.
Yeah, I think it's awesome.
Yeah. All right, so I've got a 1-2 punch. So my list is kind of mixed up with some classic ones. And, I don't want to do too many classics. So I'm going to bring in a couple of modern albums as well. And by modern is probably within the last 20 years compared to the last 50.
Fair enough.
But one album that I'm going to bring up that is relatively new, and of course I have to mention this because I have to mention Metallica in every episode, and even though I've already done so, I really, really enjoy this 1-2 punch on Hardwired for Self-Destruct, which is Hardwired followed by Atlas Rise. You know, Hardwired harkens back to, or the song Hardwired harkens back to their early thrash days. It's a really fast song. It's literally 3 minutes and out with that song. And they come in with this killer riff with Atlas Rise and the whole drum beat and everything that goes along with that thing. And it's one of those classic Metallica, you know, bludgeoning riffs. And it's one of those where minimal lyrics, a lot of music. And I really like that 1-2 punch.
I think that's fair. Especially, I think Atlas Rise for me is my favorite song on the album. And not just my favorite. Like, I know sometimes like songs that appeal to me don't appeal to the masses. But I think Atlas Rise kind of hits all those cylinders, right? Like, I think it probably is objectively the best song on the album. So, at least on a large scale. Like, I don't mean everybody has to feel that way. So I think that's pretty fair. I mean, I I told you before we started I wasn't even going to write anything down for Metallica because I figured you had it covered. But yeah, I mean, just from that perspective, yeah, it's killer.
Oh, well, good. I'm glad you agree. All right. So what do you got next for your next album?
I'm gonna go also modern to 1990s. Um, I'm gonna do "Slave to the Grind" from Skid Row. Um, Monkey Business is such a cool opener. I think that's one of those songs that like it really does hook you from the beginning, but then following it up with a badass track like Slave to the Grind. Like I love Skid Row's first album. Honestly, I kind of like it better. And I know it's not as heavy, but there's something very nostalgic about it for me that I think I have a little bit more attachment to that first album. The second album hits just so much heavier, and it was such a cool direction for them to go into. And the first two tracks, um, man, they fucking nailed it. It's just so good. So like, I think Business is great, but Slave to the Grind is just absolutely killer. And those two tracks just like you can't deny it. Like that energy's there that I wish, man, I want to talk about Skid Row so much, but like, they're really the career is so limited, but yeah, like this is a good time to talk about them because this album is killer.
I like that album a lot. Look, I like that album so much. I bought that Slave to the Grind on vinyl for Record Store Day a few years back. So it is a good album. Lots of good songs in that one. I mean, was it Quicksand Jesus is on that
Oh
album
yeah, that's awesome
in a
song
darkened
too.
room. I love In a Darkened Room. But man, when Monkey Business comes on and I hear that little cleanish guitar at the beginning,
Hmm.
it is so cool. I mean, you get ready, you start stretching because you know you're going to start doing the air drum, banging the shit out of the fucking drums, and you know, all of a sudden it just builds up to that scream from Sebastian, and they just start banging away at their instruments. It is such a cool intro. I love that song. And yes, Slave to the Grind is a cool riff. It's a grinder. It's a banger of a song as well. I like that album. I like that 1-2 punch. I will say this. I like you just mentioned, I like the first Skid Row album better
Hmm.
overall because the first Skid Row album to me is a front to backer. Um, but the two albums are so different. It is, it's completely different. Like the first album kind of leans towards hair metal, where this one was just heavy.
It's heavy, yeah.
They still had their elements to kind of keep the hair metal um, hair metal fans hooked in with a song like In a Darkened Room and Quicksand Jesus and all that stuff. But it was not necessarily meant for that crowd. It was meant to be heavier. And I did get both versions when it came out. So I got, I was working at the record store at the time. I got both versions on promo. So I got the one with Get the Fuck Out and the one without it. So,
Mm.
and what's funny is the vinyl, when they reissued it, has both songs. So that's pretty cool.
That is cool.
Very cool. I that's a really damn good album, but it wasn't on my list.
Yeah, when I was going through like kind of I just built a new PC, and I'm still in the process of moving some data from my old PC to my new one. But the primary, like, I was so focused on, dude. I don't know how many of you listeners out there are like gamers or into building PCs and stuff like that. This is like my dream PC right now. Um, I in the last time I built one, I made a lot of concessions. This time I didn't. Like, this is fully top of the line, like everything that I could purchase that was, the newest stuff. Like, I've got a 4090 GTX, I mean, sorry, RTX, um, graphics card in this thing. Like, if that means anything to any of you out there, like, I'm so happy with this thing. But in the process of it, like, I still have like all my music on my old PC. I did move some of it, but I need to get like a portable hard drive, or an enclosure or something, like, to kind of move some of the stuff. But yeah, like, I was like trying to find a way to go through and move the stuff over. So it was like hard to find all of my music in one place. So I was struggling with that a little bit as I was going through it. And when I came across Skid Row, I was like, oh, I know. Yeah, I have to put Slave to the Grind on there.
That's cool. That's cool. I'm so happy for you in terms of you finally getting the computer that you really want. I mean, that's always a dream. Like, I've always sacrificed my computer needs, or not needs, my computer wants,
Mhm.
for the value of getting a computer that I can afford.
Yeah, and I understand. Like, man, it's like that for all of us out there, right? I mean, right now it's tough, but sometimes you put your wants first. It's very rare, and this time I was like, you know what, I'm going for it. So had to be this way.
Good, man. I'm glad. Glad to hear that. Okay, so since you're in the '90s, there's a lot of albums here that I'm looking at that, well, not a lot. There's a few that are in the '90s. For me, there's a couple that are in the 2010s ish, couple in the '70s, couple in the '80s, and fair enough, right? So, because you picked Anthrax's '90s debut, if you want to put it that way, and you picked Skid Row's '90s debut, I'm going to pick a band that debuted in the '90s as well. So this album that I'm going to discuss now came out in 1992, and it was, like I said, it was a debut album from Stone Temple Pilots. I don't think we've talked much about STP on this show, and I got to tell
Only
you,
when we did our grunge episode, and we did talk
right,
about it a little bit. Yeah.
we did talk about them a little bit, and realistically, I mean, there's a lot of people that are going to be listening to this show, or listen to the show on a regular basis. The ones who kind of listen to this on a regular basis, and the fans, they I'm going to sit there and say that they tend to be older, like me. Somewhere between your age and my age, right? They're going to fit in
I
that
think that's probably accurate.
right? And so they kind of understand that in the '80s, metal was metal. You didn't differentiate. They started to in the late '80s because thrash music was so distinctively different than the rest of metal. But if it was Black Sabbath, it was metal. If it was Twisted Sister, it was metal. If it was Quiet Riot, it was metal. If it was Poison, it was pop metal. That's where they started to just differentiate, right? So, um, when you entered the '90s, the quote unquote grunge scene taking over, when you listen to some of those songs, you realize they're pretty metal in terms of what was already out. You know,
Yeah.
bands like Morbid Angel and bands like Cannibal Corpse, those were extreme. You know, even I was gonna say Soul Machine, but that's not the name of the band. Even Fear Factory was industrial metal. They were extreme-ish in a way, right? So it
I, I want that to be a genre of metal, extremish metal.
extreme, extreme. It's not all the way extreme, but it's extreme-ish. Um, so when all of a sudden you hear this song start and the guy's is basically singing into a megaphone, into a microphone on top of it, and he talks about, I am smelling like a rose, that somebody gave me because I'm dead and bloated, right? And those drums kick in. I mean, that's heavy as shit. And no one expected the album to go the way that it did, because there's some ballads on the album, some acoustic stuff, and a lot of hooks. It's a great album. But the 1-2 punch on that album is Dead and Bloated and then Sex Type Thing. Sex Type Thing comes in and just rips your face off. It's such a good song, and it's not a very complicated song. It's really just like one riff repeated over and over and over again until they get to the chorus.
Yeah.
But such a good song, and especially when you're coming in with Dead and Bloated and you got this slow, sludgy, grungy, headbanging song, and then they they literally turn it up a notch and come in with Sex Type Thing. That to me is a killer 1-2 punch.
I mean, I'd say it's pretty valid. I've talked about Stone Temple Pilots. Like, I put them on my list of my favorite grunge bands. I know a lot of people don't love them because, or at least grunge fans, because of they're quote unquote not grunge, or they copied other bands and whatever. They're awesome. And at least that first album, and I kind of trailed off of them as time went on, obviously, but I got into them before I got into a lot of the originators of grunge. So for me, like, Scott Weiland had great vocals. I loved him in Velvet Revolver. That first album's really cool. I think I specifically talked about that one when we did our grunge episode, like, a lot in detail. And it really got me kind of into that genre of music. So, yeah. And we talked a little bit about this. Like, go back and listen to that grunge episode if you haven't heard it. It's a good one. Or I think it was a couple episodes, if I remember.
It was like 2 in a row. Okay, so what do you got?
I'm going to go to a different part of the world, to South America. I know you're not really up on this band, but I'd be remiss not to mention them. Angra with Angel's Cry. That was their first album, and their first track. I'm going to include this because it's a little instrumental opener that adds into the main first track. You talk about some albums that have like a little instrumental opener. I don't always consider that to be like the first track, right? Like, I think that's part of the first track, right?
Right. I mean, like, for instance, I don't want to mention it yet, but yes, you're correct.
Okay. Yeah, I've got one we can talk about, but I'm pretty sure we might be talking about the same album. So they have Unfinished Allegro that goes into Carry On, and then Time. And so if you haven't listened to Angra, like, check out that first album. It is so good. Andre Matos vocals, they're just so amazing. He is able to hit such high pitches and sing like so cleanly. That first album for me is what really hooked me with the band. I love the stuff they did later with their second singer, Edu Falaci. Kiko Loureiro, who we've talked about many times with Megadeth. He's not in the band now, but he was on Dystopia, which is also killer album. But the first 2 tracks on there, including that instrumental, man, it'll hook you. Like, give it a chance. If you're out there and you have listened to Angra, like, I want to hear from you. Like, put your comments on the video and stuff like that, because man, I'd love to know more Angra fans, just to be honest. But this album, like as a whole, I think it's a pretty much a front to backer for me. But it's I just wish there more people would listen to it, because it's amazing.
That's cool. I am completely unfamiliar with Anger. I've heard like one song, and it was a cover of a Judas Priest song. So I apologize for those people who are Anger fans. It's just one of those things. I power metal, and or specifically European power metal. It was not something that I was well aware of, because I I got out of the scene. It's kind of weird. Like I said, like I when I moved from New York to Florida in the in '87, I used to get a lot of magazines, because I could walk to the store, buy the magazines, and come back. Right.
Yeah.
And then as I was a 17 and 18-year-old, I drove to the store. I could go to bookstores and get the magazines I wanted. When I went to Florida, um, I didn't have any friends when I first started college. I got some good friends that, a couple of them have lasted, till now, in friendships. But
The others are all dead. No.
not yet. But it Miami was not a metal town at all. So it was very different for me. I mean, just the whole culture shock when I got there. So
Yeah.
I kind of fell out of it, and then when I got to start working in the record store, basically 3 years later, um, it was a college town right across the University of Miami, or right across from the University of Miami, and they're into college music. They're in REM and all that bullshit. And then, on the backside of the area, there was a lot of people that were into hip hop and R&B and stuff like that. So I was kind of stuck in a not so metal world living
Yeah.
in Miami. So I just lost track with everything that was European. I mostly got stuck with just basically listening to what was mostly American and or English, because European, anything outside that was east of England, I barely heard about, and that's my fault, because I could have dug in a little deeper, but I didn't. So anyhow, um, let's put a pause on the show for a second, because I want to mention something that um, we have done a terrible job at over the past 5 years that we've been on this podcast, and that is our social media presence.
Yeah, we're not good at it.
We're not good at it at all. And so I really am going to try and concentrate about going back, because it did for a while. So we're going to post the episode on Facebook, or at least post the fact that we have a new episode. Make sure I hit it on X. Yeah, and oh, by the way, for those of you who heard or listened to or picked out at the end of our show, we always talk about, you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, or Facebook. We still call it Twitter, don't we, or X, right?
I think we switched over to X. I don't
So-
know. We're going to today.
Right. So and Instagram. So the thing about it, the X thing was, we lost our account for a while, and we got it
Yeah.
back. So now I have 2 X accounts that are debating metal related. I'm using the one with the black logo. That is the one that I'm going to concentrate with. So if you see our current logo, which is black with the white skull, that is the one that we're using. The one that is white with the black skull, that's the one that got locked up. We never were able to change it. I don't really use it whatsoever. So that's the one. And again, try to post to Instagram. We're trying to keep the Facebook thing going, because for a while there we had it going, and we would get some comments here and there, and I just completely fell off the map with it. So I'm going to try and do my best beginning this year. This episode, we're gonna come out hard swinging with our social media presence. All right, so back to our regularly scheduled program again. Best 1-2 punch metal. I'm gonna go with. I think this is a pretty damn good one, and that's Fight. Rob Halford's first band after leaving Judas Priest, although he didn't technically leave at the time, but we won't get into that. Into the Pit. So the album is War of Words, Into the Pit, and then going into Nailed to the Gun. First of all, opening up the thing with Into the Pit, fucking amazing song. Holy shit. I mean, that literally just crushes you straight from the beginning. Just the sound, the production of the guitars, Scott Travis's drumming is just out of this world. I mean, if you thought Painkiller was crazy, this is just so much more on top of that. And then they go into Nailed to the Gun, and it's a great song. It slows everything down, but it's still got such a killer hook, and that production is still there. It is amazing 1-2 punch. I love that album. To me, War of Words is a front to backer. I love that album. I can't say enough about it. And that 1-2 punch to me is one of the top 5 in my opinion.
I mean, yeah, like that album obviously is the better of the two from that band. I mean, from Fight, as I said it in a weird way, from that band. But yeah, I mean, I think, obviously Rob had, tried some different things. He did that industrial album. Fight is like that moment when Bruce Dickinson kind of came back from doing other stuff, right? Like, it's when somebody goes away from a band that you like, and then they come back and they do something different. I mean, they do something more along the lines of what you know them for, right?
Right.
What I'm saying is, like, you step away from Judas Priest doing Painkiller and then come back with Fight. It's like, holy shit. Like, he's back. The same thing with Bruce. Bruce stepped away, and yeah, he did more different things. Like, he did his Skunk Works and all that other shit. But like, when he got back and he did, what's the album with the Edison on it?
Oh, that was Accident of Birth.
Accident of Birth. So he comes back with Accident of Birth, and you're like, holy shit, he's back, right? So what I mean is, like, just that, like, when you step away from the thing and it's the unknown, and the unknown is scary to a lot of people because it's just it's uncertainty. So if Rob steps away from Judas Priest, especially after what I always call their best album, I know people have different opinions, but Painkiller is the best album. You get what I'm saying? Like, you step away, you do something different. It can be scary. Well, he comes back with Fight, and it's not scary. It's fucking kick ass.
No, I agree. I mean, there was a lot of unknowns for Rob. He didn't know what to do. He was playing with a new band, and all basically people he picked out from living in Phoenix, and basically from friends of friends, and that's how he put the band together. So yeah, no, I get that. That's Fight is, to me, just that. When that band came out and they had that killer logo, I was so disappointed when the second album came out. All right, what do you have for your another album?
I mean, we were just talking about Rob Halford, so I'm gonna talk about Judas Priest, Screaming for Vengeance. Starts with Hellion, Electric Eye. I mean, Hellion's the one that I was mentioning earlier, where it's a instrumental track that leads into the main track. So I'm not going to separate those two. I think they belong together. And then Riding on the Wind. And
yeah, that's what I was talking about too. That was
I figured, yeah. So I mean, Hellion alone is such a cool instrumental opener. I mean, it doesn't vary that much. It just It's that twin guitar attack that builds into the main track, which is Electric Eye. Electric Eye is such a cool opener, really hooks me. Like as much as I love Painkiller, like this is my number two, right? So um it's just this is a front to back album for the most part. I think it has one or two more missteps, like Bloodstone's a cool song, but I think,
Take these chains off is weak.
yeah, that's where it's the weakest, right? So, but overall, like I can listen to that album from beginning to end and not skip. It's that good. And then Riding on the Wind, I think is an even cooler song, to be honest. It's hard to judge because I think both are so damn perfect, but um, of the Judas Priest albums, like this is one of the ones that just hits the hardest. I think even more so, like it's hard for me to say Painkiller is a 1-2 punch because it starts off with Painkiller, and that's like it's hard to follow Painkiller. So as much as I love that, I don't think it meets that qualification to the same degree as this album.
Yeah, Hell Patrol being the second song, just it's a good song,
Yeah,
but it doesn't have that same. I don't want to say catchiness. It doesn't grab you like.
it not as much. Like I still love it, and I think it's a good like kind of step down, like almost a breather after Painkiller, because Painkiller's that awesome. It kind of is the 1-2 punch on its own.
Well, right, exactly. I mean, and it's funny because you think about it like when we talk about what the standard bearer is, right? Metallica's Master of Puppets. You got black, not black. You've got Battery,
Battery,
which is
but
so brutal, right?
but
And
I
it's
don't think Battery's as good as a song as Master of Puppets.
right, and so that's the funny thing, right? Because like so many people talk about how great Battery is, right?
And it
And
is, yeah.
and it's an amazing song. Master of Puppets is just one of those. It's like it for me. If you want to put it this way, it's Metallica's Stairway to Heaven. Has everything in it. You
Master
know,
of Puppets is universal. It hits normies, it hits us metalheads, it hits everybody. Obviously, they've used it in what's that show? Greater
Stranger
Greater Things, Stranger Things. But like it's universal, right? Like I think anybody can get on board with it. Whereas Battery is going to appeal more to us metalheads because it's brutal, it's awesome. So it's different perspectives, right? And I think everybody can kind of acknowledge when a song is that universal hit in a different way than like us as metalheads knowing that it's a kick-ass metal song.
Oh no, you're absolutely correct. I mean, it is one of those crossover appeals that literally came out of nowhere when you
Yeah.
think about it, because you didn't expect normies to like Master Rose. You expect them to like Enter Sandman, but
Mm-hmm.
not Master Puppets. And Master Puppets has just grown across the bow, across the aisle. It's one of those that just, oh, okay, yeah, that's what like we've talked about before. Master of Puppets was never an encore song for Metallica. It was a middle of the set song. Except during the Master of Puppets tour, it was the second song, but it was never a closer.
Yeah.
And they show, it shows up on Stranger Things a few years back, and this last tour, the tour that they were doing, but before 72 Seasons. But like right before 72 Seasons, they were playing that as the last song. The encore. Now with the 72 Seasons sort of way they're doing it, where it's no repeat weekends. One night has Master of Puppets closing the show. And so it's got that kind of appeal now because it never did that before. Which I'm glad. I think it deserves its place there. It is their to me their best song. Okay. So you picked Judas Priest. I had that on my list as well. So, we're coming down to some really good albums here. There's some big names on here. I'm going to go with some of the lesser known names right now. And when I say that, it's because they're not at the same level. But right after this album, everything comes up a notch. I'm going to go with a new wave of American heavy metal band, metalcore band that you don't necessarily enjoy as much as I do. Shadows Fall, the Retribution album, and the 1-2 punch of My Demise and Still I Rise. Man, oh man, when you talk about a 1-2 punch, that is definitely one that I would consider to be up there with the best of them. I mean, My Demise, it has an intro very similar to what we were talking about with Electric Eye. It's got the kind of soft, quiet intro, and Electric Eye is not soft and quiet, but it's the
That's building.
it's an instrumental that builds the song. I mean, it's the song itself. Excuse me, it's an instrumental that builds into the main first song. In Shadows Fall case, it's The Path of Imminent Ruin. It's a 1:13 introduction that leads into My Demise. My Demise is the first song on the album. And then Still I Rise, catchy single. It's My Demise has just got so much going for it as a song, and they clean vocals, dirty vocals, riffs here and there, a slow part where they build into very similar to how Master of Puppets has that slow uh, part in the middle, that slow quiet part where they got the harmony breaks. This one goes into a quiet part. It builds up, and then it goes into a shredding solo, and then comes back to the main verse type of thing. And Still I Rise is, I mean, I tell you what, if you got any way to reach a higher pitch in your vocals when you're singing in this style, they pulled it off in Still I Rise. I love that song. Killer hook on that song. So this 1-2 punch from Shadows Fall, My Demise, and Still I Rise off the Retribution album is definitely up there.
I know nothing about it. So
And I know you don't.
so I really can't comment on it. I think we did an episode at one point where we talked about Shadows Fall.
Yeah, we did an episode on Shadows Fall, and we've done an episode on the new wave of American heavy metal.
Well, there you go. Go listen to that.
All right, what do you got?
I'm going to talk about two albums from a band. We've mentioned a couple Big Four members, but let's mention one more. I'm going to start with Rust in Peace from Megadeth, with Holy Wars, The Punishment Due, and Hangar 18. I mean, let's talk about solos. I mean, some of the most killer solos on any metal album ever. The trading back and forth between Dave and Marty. Oh my God. Like it's like two gods trying to top each other. Like it's so good. And that goes on both songs, especially Hangar 18. It's crazy. Like, cause I as much as I love Holy Wars Punishment Due, Hangar 18, like once they get back and forth into the soloing, it's so killer. It's hard to pick for me which one's better, but I think for me, Holy Wars wins a little bit, but I mean, it's got to be tough for most of us out there to kind of pick between the two.
I tell you what, this is on my list. This is a top fiver to me. This album, and this 1-2 punch, Holy Wars and Hangar 18. I mean, Holy Wars has got so many different things that happen during that song. It's like, holy shit, you know? Just the intro, the start stopping it, later on. I mean, the solos are great. Just the Arabian feel to it, or Middle Eastern feel to the song in the middle is such a cool break. It's a freaking great song. And then they come in with Hangar 18 after that, and it's like, wow, it just keeps on going. But it's got Hangar 18's got such a good hook, at the chorus. So
It really does, yeah.
And then like you said, the guitar soloing back and forth. Oh man, I mean, the whole album is like that, So I agree with you. And this one, like I said, this is a top fiver to me in terms of 1-2 punch.
Well, I got one more from Megadeth as well, Dystopia. The Threat is Real, and then Dystopia. Like the whole album is a front to backer. Like it's so kick ass. It was such a return to form, and even more so in a lot of ways. Like I think it's risen up to be one of my favorite Megadeth albums. Period. But those two tracks, I remember hearing them the first time and just being like, "Holy crap! Like this is so good." And Dystopia to me is kind of like a step forward from The Threat is Real. But what a killer way to start that album.
Yeah, and I agree with that. It's a great 1-2 punch. I really, really, really like The Threat is Real. I think that's an amazing song. Just the I don't know, there's something about the build in that song, and then that riff at the beginning. There's just that chug and how it goes. It's
Yeah.
super, super cool. And the just the way he composed the word phrasing and the lyrics throughout that song. It's amazing. And Dystopia is
Hmm.
killer track. Killer track.
Yeah, I mean, if you could call it like a 1, 2, 3 punch, the Fatal Illusion,
Oh, I
like
know. Fatal Illusion
yeah,
is good too. I
yeah.
mean, and that's the same thing when you think about what went on with Rust in Peace. I mean,
Oh
you
yeah, yeah.
about you go from Holy War is the punishment due, and then you go into Hangar 18, and then there's Take No Prisoners. I'm shit, and it continues because Five Magics is amazing. So that
Yeah,
whole
I mean, both of these albums, like honestly, so good.
exactly. Um, So you spoke about Megadeth. That was on my list too. That, like I said, top fiver. Um, let's keep in the thrash mode for a minute there, and I'm going to talk about Testament. And which Testament album am I going to talk about? It's kind of hard to say because they've got a good history of having some good 1-2 punches throughout their career. But I'm going to talk about Dark Roots of Earth, Rise Up, and Native Blood. Um, Man, Rise Up is literally one of those kinds of songs that it comes out, it just smacks you hard, and it asks you to play along, if you want to put it that way. I mean, it wants you to sing along. When I say war, you say rise up. That whole interaction back and forth, I love that song. That song is such a killer song. It's so brutal. It's so in your face. And then they have, in true Testament style, they have their single, their hook, their not it's not necessarily the best song in the album, but it's the most catchy. And Native Blood is that. I think that's a great song. It's got a great riff. I love the lyrics, the meanings behind it. It's such a cool song to me. That to me, after looking at all of Testament's career, is probably their best 1-2 punch, in my opinion. I know that lots of people are going to disagree. They're going to think back about the New Order, and they're going to think about Eerie Inhabitants and the New Order. They're going to think about Practice What You Preach, and I think it's Perilous Nation is the one after that. I think there's lots of different things to say, but um, to me, for Testament, this 1-2 punch outdoes the rest.
Uh, uh, come kind of gonna disagree with you on this one.
You
I know
can't.
you love this
Allowed to.
album. I know you love this album. I'm not as big of a fan. And I've said that before. I think a lot of the lyrics kind of come off as cheesy, but I like Native Blood a lot. I think that's probably one of the best our songs on the album. I really do kind of, especially kind of around this time period. I think this is one of the weaker albums from the band. So I think I mean I've talked about Brotherhood and the Stake before. I think that's a better album. And even like that 1-2 punch I think is better. Brotherhood of the Snake and then the Pale King. The Pale King is one of my favorite Testament songs. Period. So um, I'm not saying you're wrong, but for me it's not as strong as some of the other ones like in the other albums you mentioned. Even I think are a stronger 1-2 punch, but it's all about perspective and what your taste is too. So um I'm not. Yeah, I mean, it just. I think the other ones you mentioned I like more. So
Yeah, well, you know what? You're wrong. Okay, that's just the way it is. So I look at it in a. I mean, the early. I don't know, for whatever reason, and I'll put it this way: something about the production of the early albums doesn't give certain songs the same punch that they deserve.
I think that's probably a fair assessment. But
I really like the New Order, right? Eerie Inhabitants and the New Order, that 1-2 punch is very good.
yeah,
However, I think, because another way I was looking at this whole thing, when you put all the songs together, think about, again, we talk about the standard bearer for us, right? This is battery that jumps at the end, battery ends quick, right? And then it just jumps right into Master of Puppets. That riff hits you right away.
Mhm.
Albums that have that kind of, yeah, the second song is good, or second song is one of the best ones, but to have that slow intro or a quiet intro, that is where it loses the 1-2 punch, in my opinion, in my judgment, because I have to wait for the build on a second album. I want this to slap me in the face. 1-2, 1-2.
I
Very
didn't know you were into that.
I know, right? Like Megadeth's, Holy Wars and Hangar 18, that does exactly that.
Yeah.
Okay. Electric Eye into Riding on the Wind does exactly that. Okay. Hardwired and Atlas Rise does exactly that. But when I have to wait for that second song to build and then come in, I lose it. To me, I've gained I got my breath back. I don't want to get my breath back if I want to consider this a top 5 or type of 1-2 punch. And
No, fair enough. Yeah.
that's the difference with those older albums for me.
Yeah. I mean, like I said many times, like I'm more of a modern Testament fan, and part of it is the production. I mean, I'm not a production guy per se, but I do want the drums to sound strong. I do want the bass to really kind of resonate, and I think some of that's lacking on the earliest albums. But for me, Brotherhood of the Snake and even Titans of Creation, Formation of Damnation's another good one too. But yeah, I mean, it's all perspective.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's the second half of Testament's career that in the 2010s and on. Man, it's amazing stuff. All right, so we got a few more albums left each. So what do you got?
Um, why don't I do another pair? I got Iron Maiden, 2 albums. Somewhere in Time is the first one. I think there's a lot of Iron Maiden albums, obviously, that have great songs and are possibly more iconic to some of you listeners out there. But when you really think about it, a lot of times they started with something heavy and then they went to something softer, or, even one of their best albums, Invaders, I don't think is a great one, you know, start to the album per se. I think it's a good track, but it's not that level. But when it comes to Caught Somewhere in Time and then Wasted Years, I mean, those two are some of the strongest songs on the album, and they're both just really kick ass. When we saw them just a couple months ago, those songs were both on the. Isn't that how they started the
Yeah.
show?
No, they didn't do Wasted Years. They went into, if I'm not mistaken, they went into Stranger in a Strange Land
Oh,
second.
Wasted Years was at the end, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a closer. Yeah.
It was a closer. So, but both of these tracks were on there, and they're really freaking awesome. So, I think this was one of the first albums that they had that had really a 1-2 punch.
And, the one right before it was pretty good.
Which was the one?
And that was the one I was going to talk about, Power Slave.
Oh, I've got that listed as well. That's the second one I'm going to mention. So, I mean, you can kind of say a bit about it, and then I'll chime in.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you're going to talk about Somewhere in Time and Caught Somewhere in Time and Wasted Years, for me, my best 1-2 punch for Iron Maiden was Aces High and 2 Minutes to Midnight, because you got Aces High with that killer intro. See, now that's what's funny is I wish the album would have had the Winston Churchill intro, but it didn't. Right.
Mhm.
So it comes in and just starts off, and you've got that beat or that riff that comes in for however I think it's 8 measures, and then they just tear into the main part of the song, and then they finish the song finishes, and there's no breath. You go right into this killer riff from 2 Minutes to Midnight, and that's, to me, that 1-2 punch of Aces High and 2 Minutes to Midnight. It's hard to beat anywhere in Iron Maiden's discography. I think it's
I
better than Somewhere in Time.
see. The only thing that makes me think like it's not as good of a 1-2 punch, and I mean only very very slightly, is because I think Aces High is the superior song. I know from a normie perspective, 2 Minutes to Midnight probably has the larger appeal. But I think the metalhead inside of me just likes Aces High that much more, right? So, I mean, Aces High is getting a Funko Pop. 2 Minutes to Midnight is not, right? So,
Well, there's
so
also there's also the fact that when when Derek Riggs did Aces High, because remember, so Iron Maiden released 2 Minutes to Midnight first as a single. The album cover for 2 Minutes to Midnight, or the single cover, was a full bodied Eddie, and in the background just made the whole description of what the song was about. Whereas
I know it was a joke,
no,
man.
no. But it's funny because Aces High, that Funko Pop, dude, that album cover is killer,
It
right?
is.
So that's the reason why you didn't make it a Funko Pop about it, because you can't make it about 2 Minutes to Midnight.
I
So
was making a joke.
it's a
So
funny
the
comparison,
the
though.
the point though is that um I think Caught Somewhere in Time is an amazing song, and then you finish it, the 1-2 punch with a better song. And I don't think that is a requirement, but part of it in my head, I can't get away from the thought of like, the jab, straight punch, and that's why I put Power Slave maybe a little bit less than it, but either way, I've got it on my list. You know what I mean? So
Yeah. Okay. Well, so you mentioned something funny about Number of the Beast, and how you got Invaders, and then it goes to Children of the Damned.
yeah,
So for 2 albums in a row, so basically Killers, they did the same thing. They started with an up tempo song, Ides of March into Wrathchild. Um, so Wrathchild being the main song, and then it goes into Murders in the Rue Morgue. Killer song. Murders in the Rue
hmm
Morgue has that quiet intro,
yeah,
and even though it's a definitely overall a more upbeat song than Children of the Damned goes through 2 verses before it then changes to a faster song. Um,
yeah. They had a tendency to start off with something kind of like that, and then go to a softer song like Remember Tomorrow, right?
yeah,
Like,
like when they did that,
oof,
they went from Prowler to Remember Tomorrow, and it was like, whoa, okay.
yeah.
So
I
that was
mean,
their style. It was a fast song and then slower.
something to slow it but build up, and yeah. So I mean, that's why I can't really put a lot of them on the 1-2 punch list, but it doesn't mean they're not amazing albums, right?
Exactly, because even Peace of Mind, it comes out blazing with Where Eagles Dare, but then they slow it down with
Revelations,
Revelations.
yeah.
So they've had, and they do it on every single album, because you think about it, Brave New World, killer first track.
And then they slow it down, yeah.
Ghost of Navigator has that slow intro, and it picks up, but it's kind of got a normal pace. So
Yep.
yeah, it's that's their MO. So they don't have that true 1-2 punch style of releasing for the
Not
first 2
not
songs.
typically, yeah.
Right. And look, even Seventh Son of a Seventh Son, when you think about it, the second song, Infinite Dreams, it's kind of ballady.
Mhm.
So, after Moonchild being such a good song. So that's their MO. That's been their MO their whole entire career. All right. So I'm coming down to you took one of my last ones, which is good because that means I don't have to mention it. But I'm going to say this one. I'm going to put Black Sabbath, the album Paranoid, War Pigs, and then Paranoid. That is the original 1-2 punch.
Fair enough.
I mean, when you think about it, the album came out in 1971, I think it was, and it literally, War Pigs, such a great song. Slow intro kind of thing, then it builds up to that, the little hi-hat beat going down, and everybody, the sing-along intro verse that people, that has become like Master of Puppets. The normies know it too.
Well, I mean, WWE's now using it annually on their War Games pay-per-view.
And there you go.
I mean, that's where it's at now. Like, it's become even more mainstream.
Right. So it's crossed over.
Mm-hmm.
And then the way it ends, where they speed up the tape, is also an interesting thing. So it speeds up and it pitches up a little higher, and then all of a sudden you hear that down, 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 and a killer riff for Paranoid, and Paranoid just rushes through 3 minutes in your face. So that 1-2 punch right there is perfect. It doesn't give you the opportunity to breathe.
You know what's so crazy about Paranoid is it's just the same riff over and over and over again, but it never gets old.
No, not at all. I mean, it is, you have that intro riff and then a chug.
It's like perfectly timed too, because it never overstays its welcome. And so, like, it's just that really cool opener, and then just kind of follows the same melody throughout the entire track. And, it allows Ozzy's vocals to kind of take the lead, but at the same time, the riff is so good that it just never gets old. It's such a great song.
It is. I mean, and it's easy. It's easy. It's just that, literally that chug is like 90% of the song. Dun 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 dun. I mean, that's it. Yeah, except for the intro riff, which is super cool too.
Agreed. I think it's a great choice.
So what do you got? I'm coming up on my last ones. How many more do you want to do?
I got 2 more on my list. That's it.
Okay, perfect.
So just do one right now?
Yeah, just do one.
Okay. So I'm gonna pick. I've got 2 Scandinavian bands left. They're from 2 different countries, so maybe if you've been listening to us for a while, you might be able to guess who. But I'm just gonna do the first one right now, and then we'll kind of trade back and forth, and I'll finish off with one of my favorite bands. So
Wait, I think I know who you're talking about. Hold on. Is it Ghost?
no, it's not. No.
Darn,
So
I thought I had it.
I'm gonna go with one I've mentioned a few times before, but I think it bears discussing again. In Flames Clayman with Bullet Ride and Pinball Map. That album to me, it just stands the test of time. I think it's just probably always going to be in my top 10 albums of all time. Even though I don't really follow the band anymore, it's just one that I just love so much. So someday I'm gonna get my hands on a original Clayman vinyl, and that's one of the goals that's on my list. But this album to me is again a front to back. Like I don't skip a track, and it was to me the pinnacle of their songwriting, their maturity, and still maintaining their original sound in a lot of ways. And so these first 2 tracks are just absolutely killer. And Bullet Ride is such a cool opener. I love the way it starts with kind of like a vinyl record sound, and then just kind of takes off from there. And then, Pinball Map comes in as the next one and just hits even heavier and harder. And it, to me, it's kind of like one of the definitions of 1-2 punch, is just because that first one hits so hard and the second one just knocks you out. And I think it's probably one of the best examples I have on my list.
I definitely agree with you. I mean, I like that you turned me on to In Flames, you turned me on to the Clayman album, and I added those two songs to my playlist, perennially. So definitely agree with you on that.
Kick ass, man.
All right, so I've got two more. You've got one more left after this, so we're almost done here, and then we're going to get to our big four. And we're gonna stay in the same region of the world that you were just in. I'm gonna go with Amon Amarth. Now, you had a twofer earlier, and I think I might have to do that with Amon Amarth. I'm gonna have to talk about two albums that I think really hit that and hit the mark when it comes to 1-2 punches. And I won't talk too much about them because I don't listen to them as often as I did when we were talking about a lot of the Scandinavian melodic death metal. But Deceiver of the Gods and As Loki Falls, 1-2 punch, amazing.
That's a really good choice. Honestly, that's a really good choice.
I mean that is about as 1-2 punchy as you can get, because there was no breathing for like those 7 to 8 minutes between those two songs. And then I'm gonna sit there and say, we've talked about it, we've mentioned it several times. The standard bearer being Master of Puppets. I'm gonna go with Amon Amarth doing their tribute to Battery with Fafner's Gold, and then following it up with Crack the Sky. Fafner's Gold, I mean, is almost Battery, in melodic death metal terms, because they did almost the same sounding guitar intro. They almost did the same guitar intro. I mean, this acoustic guitar, and it sounds almost identical to Battery. And then it builds up just like Battery does, and then it goes into the song. And it's a thrash song. They're doing a thrash drum beat throughout, and then it goes into Crack the Sky, very similarly to how Battery ends and goes into Master of Puppets. It's nowhere near as good in terms of, Crack the Sky being, Amon Amarth's best song. Not at all. I like the Deceiver of the Gods 1-2 punch better, but Fafner's Gold, because it to me is like a tribute to the song Battery, I had to include it in this Amon Amarth grouping of albums.
I don't like that one as much. I mean, I obviously I think the Deceiver of the Gods one's a lot better. And if I'm going to pick another Amon Amarth one, I'd probably pick Surtur Rising. I think that is really killer 1-2 punch. So I'm not going to go into tremendous amount of detail there, but I know you like that Berserker album. I'm not as big of a fan. I think it's better than Jomsviking. But Deceiver of the Gods was really the last great Amon Amarth album to me. As much as I do like the new stuff and it is fun, it's not as exciting to me.
You don't want to put your back into it?
I know what you mean by that, but it came off weird.
All right. Let's go for your final album of the night.
For my final album, I'm going to pick Children of Bodom, Are You Dead Yet? I love that album. I love that band. I'm so glad I got to see them live, a couple times, now that Alexi has passed. But, as much as I love every album by that band, with the exception of I Worship Chaos, I think it's an okay album, but everything else I have a lot of love for. This one, I think, really is the best example of a 1-2 punch. I think the first couple albums, to me are still the best. The first three albums, I would say, but they don't have that 1-2 punch quality quite in the same way. But Living Dead Beat, I think, is a really killer opening track, and then Are You Dead Yet is again one of those ones that really does have like more mainstream appeal. I remember it even got released on, was it Rock Band 2, which was really surprising to me at the time. And so like I think it's one of those that I think can really appeal to a larger audience, and especially this album as a whole did. It really got rid of a lot of the orchestrals that were kind of synonymous with the band, and allowed a lot of new fans to kind of come in and hear that sound, and then kind of grow into the typical Children of Bottom sound when they did kind of return to the orchestrals and everything. I remember watching what is his name? Ola England, who is the guitarist for The Haunted. He has a really wonderful YouTube channel. So check that out if you ever get the chance. He's a guitarist and, loves talking to other musicians and interviewing various musicians in metal. But he did a kind of a rating. He had been kind of badgered by his fans to listen to Children of Bottom, which he was never really a big fan of. And this kind of was the gateway to him becoming a little bit more of a fan. So I think that's a really good example for a lot of people that listen to him. Is this album was a gateway drug. So yeah, really killer opening, but even better second track. And hopefully we, someday and whatever afterlife exists, get to hear Children of Bottom play again.
That would be pretty cool. That would be pretty cool. All right. And kind of in a similar vein, and you'll understand when I talk about it in a second. I'm going to talk about a 45-year-old album celebrating its 45th anniversary this year. AC/DC, Back in Black.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Hell's Bells, and then leads into Shoot to Thrill. Shoot to Thrill is my favorite AC/DC song. I've said it several times over the years. Okay, so for it to go from Hell's Bells, which is a killer song, okay, to straight into Shoot to Thrill, man,
Shoot to Thrill is like even way better. Like Hell's Bells is an awesome song, but Shoot to Thrill is just one of those like, wasn't it on the Iron Man soundtrack and all that stuff too?
It was on the Iron Man soundtrack.
Iron Man 2. Yeah.
It was just recently in another kind of movie thing that some scene I can't remember, and they played Shoot to Thrill, and I'm like, oh hell yeah. And so to me that's such a it wasn't a movie. I'm sorry. I saw a video of a father and a daughter doing their first dance at a wedding. Okay. And they come out and they do some kind of slow ballady intro, and the DJ does that very similar to like Accept in the middle of Fast as a Shark, does the scratch, and all of a sudden you hear and the two of them grab like these sticks and start air guitaring and doing the Angus head bop and everything, and they're singing along to the song, and that's their first dance. The father-daughter dance, excuse me. It was such a cool little video. I was like, that is fucking awesome.
It's a good daughter. Brought a tear to my eye.
Yeah, right. So that is and the reason why I said there's I get that point that you made about maybe we'll see Children of Bottom, in the afterlife. Of course, there's Bon Scott that we would love to be able to see in the afterlife at some point, jam and Malcolm. Exactly. To put that band back together would be pretty awesome.
Hell yeah.
All right. So that brings a close to this one. So now we're going to get to our Big Four for 2024. So we did not do a year-end episode. Boo. Okay. So we're doing our year-end Big Four, basically, and coming up with 4 albums that we thought were the best 4 albums of 2024. So since you went first, I'll go first this time.
Sounds good to me.
So
what you got?
This one was hard for me because I don't listen to a lot of stuff, so it's kind of like I'm kind of stuck in a mode right now where for some reason this past year I didn't listen to a lot of new stuff. But when you know something new is coming out, you give it a shot, right? Well, I didn't get a chance to listen to this one too much at all, but what I heard from it was pretty damn cool. Um, Flotsam and Jetsam at number 4 with "I Am the Weapon." Um, just got a lot of classic thrash style throughout all the songs. Some of it even kind of reminded me, there was some hints of Metallica in there, which is interesting. But and I'm not. This is not a criticism so much as it's an observation. A lot of these old classic thrash bands now have drummers that are doing things that I don't think they've ever done before. In terms of like you know like it's not even double bass anymore. It's like quadruple bass drumming because they've got like 9 pedals on every head of the drum so that they can they can kick one drum and make it sound like they rolled, they hit 10 drums at one shot. um all these things, they just sound bigger, they sound faster, but they still have that classic thrash style. So that's number 4 for me, Flotsam and Jetsam. Number 3, Accept with Humanoid. Accept has been doing this since 2012. They've been steadily putting out albums with Mark Tornillo as their singer, and each album is just solid from front to back. Um, I mean, it may be getting to the point where they might want to try something different, but the formula is working for them. So why change? They have some pretty good songs in this album, so check it out when you get a chance. Number 2 is a newcomer, but is an old guy on the scene. Kerry King with "From Hell I Rise." You know, everybody wanted to hear Slayer. They kind of got that because Slayer reunited right after the release of this album to do a couple of shows, which was weird. But this album is still pretty good. There was some good riffs on there, front to back. The first single is still, to me, one of the strongest songs on the album. And number 1, Judas Priest, "Invincible Shield." What can I say? Rob Halford and company continue to deliver the goods. Yes, pun intended. So there you have my big 4 of 2024.
I mean, it's a pretty good list. I would agree with it in a lot of ways. I got some different stuff on there. I feel like I'm, you know, always kind of plugged into the same bands, and it's hard for me to get away from them. But I kind of recognize the same thing. I didn't listen to a lot of new music, and that's kind of my fault. So I was kind of reviewing all the releases from 2024, and I think I need to really step up my game this year. So listen to a lot of new stuff. I think we were pretty good about that in the early seasons of the show. Or I say seasons, like years. But I feel like, I made a lot of effort to listen to new music, and I didn't really do that this last year. So I think I'll try to do that again. Um, but my number 4 was Bruce Dickinson, The Mandrake Project. I thought that was a really cool album. It's a lot different than what he's doing with Iron Maiden. I only listened to it probably 3-4 times. So really didn't give it as much of a solid listen as some of the others. But my number 3, skipping ahead there. My number 3 is Opeth, The Last Will and Testament. I know you're not a big Opeth fan, but you went to see him live. You probably played a couple tracks off of this. So what I really like about it is it's kind of a return to form. I dropped off of Opeth for a while because I just wasn't enjoying the more jazzy stuff quite as much that they started with Heritage. Um, it's super progressive jazz rock kind of stuff, and it's very good, and the band is amazing, and I will never take that away from them. But they kind of strayed away from the harsh vocals and really went into just the clean vocals with some jazzy elements. And then this newest album, The Last Testament, I think is just absolutely fantastic. You know, I forget what it is. It's every track doesn't have a name. It's like a chapter, I think is what it means. Like, so like if you're reading a book, um uh, especially older books, they have this symbol that like looks like two S's, and I believe that stands for like chapters. So, um, correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but so everything but the last track has really no title. It's just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then a story never told. And it's just really interesting to listen to, and I was very pleasantly surprised by the whole thing. So I really enjoyed it. Um, and then it's section symbol, I think is what it means, if I'm remembering. S for section, or but it's like in literature, basically. Um, and then in my number two is Dark Tranquillity with End Time Signals. I have really loved everything that Dark Tranquillity has released in the last few years. They've taken a little bit lighter tone, and there's something about the way that the songwriting is kind of coming across right now that's just really appealing to me. And you know, they've been through a lot of lineup changes over the years. I think they'll, at this point, other than Michael or Mikhail, the longest running member is their keyboardist. So they've had, everybody else has kind of come into the band in the last, 4 or 5 years, I want to say. And so, anytime that happens a lot, it really makes me nervous with bands and the changes and sounds and whatever. But, everything from Atoma to now, like Moment, I think was absolutely fantastic album. That one kind of came out during the pandemic. But this one, right, like that just came out, like every single that was releasing, I was like, damn, it's better than the last one. And really, when the album came out, I felt the same way. So I need to give it many, many more listens, but because it just came out, I don't know, it was in the last quarter of the year. But it's kind of same with Opeth. Opeth, it's only been since I want to say November, but
Oh,
both of them,
the last one, Testament. Yeah, that came out November 22nd.
yeah. I mean, it was, yeah, like very, very recent. And then my number one, I think, was your number one, Judas Priest Invincible Shield. I listened to that so many times. And when the singles came out, the same thing. Like, I was so hyped for the album. Every song was so good that I just couldn't stop listening to it. And even when we did our worst to first with Judas Priest, I had it pretty high up, which was surprising to me because, it's so new and fresh, but like the songs are freaking great. And, Richie really, found his place in the band, and I'm so happy that they're still putting out great music. So that is my number one.
I like that. You're very well versed in Scandinavian melodic death metal, and by all means, I love the fact that you've turned me on to a lot of that stuff over there. I and you and I have talked about this, separately. I, for whatever reason, I can't get into Opeth, but as you mentioned, I did go to see them because, and I don't want to say I was forced, but one of my really good one of my really good friends, and friend of the show, Sklo, who's been on the show a few times, said, "Hey man, let's go to a concert when we're out in Phoenix because we were playing baseball out there." Um, Opeth happened to be out there. I went. Now, the unfortunate part was that I was dealing with a knee injury that happened a week and a half before I went out there. I strained my ligaments in my knee, or so I think. I had just literally, like a week or two before that, um, had literally got my knee checked. Everything was okay. It was just really sore. I was doing exercises to take care of it. I'm pitching a game, and I somehow my knee wobbled. I wrapped it up, finished the game, um, and went to this tournament, and it hurt. So when I'm standing watching this concert, It wasn't not pleasant, because part of it had to do with I'm listening to new music, and I'm like, am I getting into this? Am I not getting into this? And my knees hurting, my back is hurting. Everything was just out of whack that day, and I just went and I left mid show, and I sat outside waiting for the show to be over because I was just in pain with my back and my knee.
Yeah, it's a bummer. It probably kind of skews your perception of the show.
But I will say the show was fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay, Michael is incredible front man. He's the dry sense of humor just works really well, and an amazing guitar player. The two of them that were on stage, it's just amazing. But it's not my style of music when it comes to metal. It's too progressive for me. Put it
Yeah.
that way. Well, that's our big four albums for 2024. And that is also the end of this episode of Best of 1-2 Punches in Metal. Remember, when you like or subscribe to our show, you can listen to us just about every week if we decide to get back on that program. But you can pick us up, listen to our old episodes. I know someone just recently did that. They downloaded like 150 episodes. So check us out, click like and subscribe.
Yeah, all of you do that. Download 150 episodes. And don't forget you can interact with us on Facebook, Instagram, and our X account, which we now have back control of, and send us an email to debatingmetal@gmail.com. YouTube viewers, click subscribe and ring the bell to be notified when we post a new show. And remember to tune in to the next episode where we'll spark up another exciting metal debate. On behalf of Kenneth and myself, stay safe and always turn it up to 11.
See ya.